Hello again, this is Kevin Bernatz of Dr. Bernatz Development, and we are continuing our TTS Hubris playthrough. Now we will be starting with the action phase. So the action phase is fairly simple. I like to say, this is a storytelling game. You're sort of around for the story, you sort of go through the events and react to the situations that may happen and respond to potential um, things that you can trigger to get benefits or to hurt your opponents. But there's also lots of things that can happen that hurt you as well just through the events. So the first event we're going to draw, or the first card we're going to draw, is Apelles' Plot. Okay, so this is something that Macedon is going to have to eventually resolve. It is in the deck on turn 1. Doesn't mean it'll be drawn on turn 1. It could potentially be drawn later, but it is something that will eventually happen. So the first thing is the note is the color. It's a silver blue card. That means it's an immediate event, so you resolve it immediately. So you start at the top and work your way down. So if Philippus is in play, well he is, he's the king, Macedon must choose whether to back the traditionalist or the liberal factions at court. So if you back the traditionalist, you're going to remove from play Aratos and Taron. So he's basically backing Apelles if he backs the traditionalist. And then you also replace a Macedon alliance with a garrison, so that's a benefit. But then you remove all Macedon alliances in Peloponneso. So they're much more mean, I guess, to the Greek people. They're going to take them over with force and install garrisons, not use alliances and diplomacy. However, if they back the liberals, which means actually what happened historically, you're going to check Philippos's intrigue with a +1 for each of Tarion and Alexandros in play. If they succeed, you remove Apelles and you get 1 free alliance in Peloponnesus. If you fail, then you remove Taron and Alexandros, remove alliances from Peloponnese, and if it's a success margin of 2 or worse, so let's say we look at Philip, he has an intrigue of 3, okay? A success margin of 2 or worse would be a die roll of 5. So if you roll a 5 or 6, then Philippos would basically be removed from play and Apelles would become king. However, again, there's a +1 THM for Taron and Alexandros. So we have Alexandros and we have Taron. So effectively his intrigue is 3 + 2 or 5. So it's impossible for him to fail by 2. So the only thing is if he rolls a 6, then he does fail and Taron and Alexandros are removed from play and they lose all their alliances. But if they roll a 1 through 5, Apelles is removed from play. So why would you want to do that? So, I mean, Apelles is not a bad leader, right? 3 campaign, 3 diplomacy, 3 admin, but he's got this one special ability, Old School. When he's chief minister, Philippos cannot use his free campaign, the winter campaign special ability. And that's one of the strongest special abilities in the game. Basically, he's the only leader that can do 3 activations in a turn. But he can't do it as long as Apelles is chief minister. Now, he may die on turn 3. You can't remove him from chief minister. That's the thing. The only way chief ministers are removed is they die. So there's a chance he will die. Philippos does last until turn 9 on average. So you may just decide, okay, it's worth putting up with the -4 talents and the inability to do my special ability for a couple turns. But you get Apelles and you get, note that several of these leaders, so you have Leontios and Megaleus, have this Apelles click special ability. So if Apelles is removed except just through the ferment of the souls, so sort of random death, then they are also removed. And he is a 4 diplomacy, 4 admin, so he's not a bad leader. So again, this is a decision that players are going to have to make. I'll go with the historical, I'll back the liberals. So Macedon takes a die, and we roll it. 3. So again, they have the intrigue of 3 plus 1 for each of Alexandros and Taurion. So they actually have a intrigue of 5 as the target number. They rolled and succeeded. So success, remove Apelles from play. So let me take care of that. So Apelles comes off. Where's the chief minister? That will have to go on someone. And because he was removed, we also remove these 2 leaders. And then the rest of the event is place an alliance in an unaligned place in Peloponnesos. Note that it doesn't say in any place or Macedon, non-Macedon. It has to be unaligned. So there's only one currently. So we will place the alliance there. Now we need to put someone as a chief minister. So Taurion has the best admin. He doesn't have any admin, so we're going to make Taurion the chief minister. Aratos is not bad, but he is not a Macedon leader. He is a leader associated with the Achaean League. He may leave the court, and there are also certain rules on who can even be chief minister. So in this case, it's just better to make Taurion as your chief minister. This event is now resolved, so we remove it from play. I'm actually going to toss it right in the box. And we draw the next event. So this is Skurdilatus, the one event, you know, the turn 6 in the upper left corner. That means it's removed on turn 6 and replaced with Dirty Business in Rome. So this is a recurrent event. So you follow through with the text, starting at the top. Kingdoms may bid to basically get control of this pirate leader. And if you win the bid, you could do one of three things. You can get control of the pirate ship, but it's a CB on with Rome, so a casus belli, so Rome doesn't like it. You also would lose any alliances in Rhodos, Perinthos, and Bithynia. Note that the last is the entire satrapy, so if you had any alliances here, you would lose them. No one's going to try for that, even the Ptolemies, because they don't really want to risk war with Rome just to gain control of a squadron. They don't need a squadron. The Seleucids are borderline because, you know, they might want a squadron. However, note that the Ptolemies have 1, 2, 3 squadrons to none, so they still would be outnumbered 3 to 1. So it's not worth potentially getting at war with Rome to still be outnumbered 3 to 1. But who knows? They might change their mind if they win. Then the other is place a ravaged marker on one satrapy coastal to Adrias, Scilian, Aegean, or Pamphylian Pelagros. So that is... Sorry, it was Adrias. This should have been Scilian Pelagos, but that's okay. And Aegean Pelagos. No, Scilian, Aegean, or Pamphylian Pelagos. So that's all okay. So it's these 4 areas. So if there's a satrapy that's coastal without units, they could ravage one of those satrapies. So what that does is it would have the next turn's tax revenue, and it would prevent someone from doing a plunder in that satrapy. So let's say they ravage central Greece. Then if Macedon campaigns into here, they would not be allowed to do a, well, they could do a plunder, but they would get 0 money from it. So effectively, there would be no reason for them to do a plunder. So that's the second option. And the third is if there's no troop in Macedonia, they could ravage it and unalign a place. So again, that's another, I mean, I mentioned you want to have a troop. Now note, it doesn't matter if the troop is face up or face down. See, this mercenary was hired, so it should be face up. But like here, these troops count. Okay, they don't have to be face up. So you couldn't actually ravage Peloponnesos because there are troops here. Yeah. The last one, again, it's if no troop present. So Macedon is protected, and that's actually one thing I didn't mention prior to the last, or in the last video. The Royal Army and Siege Train of all 3 kingdoms get to be placed out by the players. I put the Macedon ones in Macedonia. The Ptolemy ones I just put in Delta. And for the Seleucids, I put the Royal Army in Seleucus and the Siege Train in Babylonia. I don't like putting the Siege Train in Seleucus because it can be mustered from here without any issues. And if it's in Seleucus on the front lines and gets attacked, it can't retreat or withdraw, so it would be lost. So the Siege Train for the Seleucids is always better kept in the back, and you only use it when you need it. Same, sometimes you could put the Siege Train back over here. Delta's really not that easy to get attacked, so I don't really think there's a risk putting it in Delta. Anyways, going back, we're going to do bids. The Ptolemies have the most money, so they're going to bid 2. I'm just going to put a die out on the face for what they're bidding. So they're bidding 2. Macedon, because they're protected here and here, because they have the troops, they don't really care. So they're not going to waste their money because they don't have a lot. The Seleucids, they're not that hurting on money, so they will also bid 2. Like any other thing, if the bids are ties, you would roll, and whoever has the higher roll would win and pay that amount. In this case, the Seleucids are going to pay, the Ptolemies are going to go to 3. Okay, why is it not letting me select the value? There we go. And the Seleucids decide, you know what, I want that squadron after all, the pirate squadron, so they're not going to mess around. They're going to bid 4. Again, this is not necessarily the ideal way to play, but just for grins and to show you how the casus belli works, Seleucids are going to play 4 or bid 4. Ptolemies are going to say, okay, that's fine. You can have it for 4. So the Seleucid money goes down to 17, and they get to pick one of these options. They're going to pick the first one. First, any alliance in Rhodos, Perinthos, or Bithynia. Well, nothing in Bithynia, nothing in Rhodos, and Perinthia is Perinthos, right? Perinthos, yeah. So Seleucids do not lose any alliance because they don't have any of those there. So it's a CB of 6+. So that means Rome will go to war on them if they roll a 6 or higher with the modifier associated with the Roman belligerents. Well, right now there's no modifier, so it's just going to be a single roll. and really anyone can roll. You could have the Seleucids roll for their own CBs. Okay, well, unfortunately I hit that. Yeah, fine. We'll have Rome go to war. It's not really going to have... You'll see that it doesn't actually make... It's not going to have a great effect currently. So if you look at the Roman guidelines, if Rome succeeds on a casus belli check, if you have any sort of influence in the Senate, you could do a diplomacy check to try to forestall the war. It's not easy. It's a -2 if you're only influential, +1 if you're after freedom of the Greeks. You basically move all your garrisons on Greek cities, and you could try to forestall the war, i.e. cancel the casus belli. Only Ptolemies have influence in the Senate, so there's no possibility for the Seleucids to prevent war with Rome. And then the Seleucid marker is here for war with Rome. And the Roman marker here gets flipped to the war side, and eventually we're going to need the consul for Seleucids. So I'm going to put them there. He is not out on the map yet, but he is essentially getting ready. He will be in Italia. You could actually just place him there for now. But until the Roman activation occurs, he is not actually on the map. So they then gain the pirate squadrons until winter quarters, limited to Adria, Scilian, and Aegean Pelagos. So it's these 3 satrapies. Note that for the pirates, these are considered friendly sea areas. So they don't have to have a port, a Seleucid port, on these sea areas. So we're going to take the pirates. Where is the pirates? There's the pirates. And we are going to turn off snap. And we're going to put them in here. Note that this placement does not immediately generate a combat. And in fact, the multiple squadrons can exist in the same area and there can be no fighting. Naval rules are very abstracted. There's really only fighting when someone tries to do something with the squadron and the other side chooses to intercept. Otherwise, squadrons just coexist in the same sea areas with no naval fighting. The exception is if you do a naval campaign, then you can sort of intentionally fight other squadrons in sea areas. So that's the event. Now we go to activations. The first activation is Seleucid. Then it's going to be Macedon, Ptolemy, and finally Rome. So the Seleucids, they're going to take the battle to the Ptolemies. They're going to activate their king. Move these out of the way. So they're activating the king for a land campaign. So you take the king's block and you put it in the origin satrapy. So this is where he's going to start from. He's starting from Seleucus. You then muster, actually let me, I can sort of go through this. So land campaigns, designate the origin, and it's either where there's already a friendly force or a controlled satrapy. So in this case, really, it doesn't matter that there's a force here, but it's because we're activating the king separately. So this is a controlled satrapy, so we're picking this satrapy as the origin. Then you designate the target. It has to be adjacent or the origin satrapy. So we could go after this city here. Note that it has two. It's a stronghold with 2 THM against it. So it's very hard to siege. So effectively his siege number of 3 has a -2 to it. So it's actually siege number of 1. If he brings a siege train, he would be able to get it on a 1 or 2. But he would be committing his entire activation just to this satrapy. He'd rather go after Quell Syria. So the target is going to be Quell Syria. Now, if he already has units on his card and he's moving from one satrapy to another, he could retain them. This doesn't apply in this case. And now he's going to muster units. So I have to have a land path to him, and he must have at least 1 unit in his final force. If he's hiring mercenaries, so let's say they had done diplomacy and gotten a controlled place here, he could hire the Galatians and bring them, because there's a land path here. And the hiring would cost 2 talents, in addition to whatever the campaign cost is. Just bringing friendly units does not cost anything to get them to the leader. It only costs once you campaign. So, he's going to bring the Royal Army. He's going to bring the siege train. He is also going to bring this one military colonist. So it's going to be 3 total units. That costs the supply cost of the satrapy, which is 3 for each unit, so that's 9. The king gets a 3 talent discount, so it's going to cost 6. Note that if he was campaigning across this border, and there's another one up here, it's +3 per unit. So effectively it would be double the cost. So this could get quite expensive. But as it is, 9 minus 3 is 6, so it's going to cost them 6 talents, so they go down to 11. And they move the king's block into Quell Syria. Now, the Ptolemies have options. They could leave these guys to sort of fend for themselves on their own. They would fight as if they had a leader of a 2 combat rating. They could appoint the king, and then it's king versus king, but he's only got a 3 battle rating. The Seleucid king has a 4, and the Seleucid king is bringing an elite unit where these guys are just regular. So this is not a good battle for the Ptolemies per se. They're likely to lose, and that would cause a lot of negative renown for the king, and Ptolemies really don't want negative renown on their king because their people are already not very loyal. Also, with this special ability, whenever he does anything, he becomes spent. So appointing him to defend would use him for the entire turn. So instead, they don't want to put the king. These 2 leaders don't have a campaign icon, no flag. So they can't be appointed at all. They can never go out on the map. So the other choice is Theodotos. He's got a 3 battle rating, which isn't bad. He also has this Master of Terrain. If he's the defending Strategos, the satrapy is considered rough terrain. So what that means is his units would strike first. So if he rolls really well, he could potentially defeat the entire Seleucid force before they even get to roll back. So the Ptolemies are going to send Theodotos. They're going to designate him as Strategos 1. So you put that on his card. You take the Strategos 1 block, put it in the satrapy, and then you put these troops on his card. Now, Seleucids are going to respond. Actually, let me rotate the Seleucid leader because he's activated, and then we rotate Theodotos because he's been appointed. They also want to use Theodotos to strengthen these defenses. However, before they get that opportunity, the Seleucids are going to say, well, I'm going to use Suborner. So, now note, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sosabios has this delaying talk special ability. When a campaign is declared against a Ptolemy-controlled satrapy and Sosabios is available, he may spend 5 talents, rotate, check diplomacy, which is a 4, and if he succeeds, the enemy kingdom has to take a different action. Now, they could still campaign here. They could do a naval campaign across the Cyprus, though that would be tricky with the Ptolemaic squadrons. But it costs 5 talents, and it uses one of Sosabios' actions. So they're not going to use that. But again, maybe you as a player may decide, okay, it's worth it to not, take that 2/3 chance that I can cancel the attack on Quell Syria. Anyways, we're going to use Suborner for Antikos. So when campaigning versus the Ptolemies, once per campaign, pay 8 talents, check his intrigue to bring a Ptolemaic friend present in the target's attribute whose loyalty is 4 or less to defect to the Seleucids. So this is again why you don't want negative renown, because the renown modifies your loyalty. But as it is, he is at loyal of 4 or less, and he is in the target's attribute. So if we spend the 8 talents, he could potentially cause him to defect to the Seleucids with half of the Ptolemaic places. The units still remain in Ptolemaic employ, so he'd still have to fight them. But he has a 50% chance, again, his intrigue is 3, 50% chance of forcing Theodotos to defect. So let us spend our money. So we're going down from 11 to 3. So that's a lot of their money. So this is not something they do a lot. Note that it also doesn't rotate him. Okay, there's no activation that you have to rotate him. Just his special ability. And then we're going to roll 1 die. Success. So, what happens? First, this leader is no longer a Seleucid leader. So we pull off the Strategos 1, counter and block. We take the troops. Remember, the troops remain in Ptolemaic employ, so they go back to here. So they remain in Quell Syria. This leader goes, he keeps his rotation, okay? He goes to the Seleucid court. He does not get to do the strength and defenses because the Seleucids said that they were doing Suborner first. So they canceled the strength and defenses. There's different ways you can play this. You could say that, all the emergency reaction stuff gets to be done first and then Suborner happens. But we intentionally kind of let it as a free-for-all. I don't know if I didn't look in the playbook to see if it designates a timing of it. I know Morgane and I always got into heated discussions on timing of things, and so we may have put something in the playbook about the timing in terms of, does it happen before or after something like a strength and defenses? I'm going to assume it doesn't. It's not that big a deal either way, because with the strength and defenses, you only have 5 of these, and when they're placed, they remain on whichever city you put them on until they're removed, and when they're removed, they go to the dispersed box for the rest of the turn. So the Ptolemies may want them for other places as well, so it's okay that they didn't actually get them out here. Not the end of the world, let's put it that way. Also, if they had gone first and then the defection happened, they would have lost 3 of them anyways, because remember, defects to the Seleucids with half round up of the Ptolemaic places there. Well, there's 5 places, so that means 3 are going to defect. If they defected, the strengthened defenses would have been lost and dispersed anyways. So we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 counterclockwise. I'm going to roll 3 dice. If I roll a 6 or if I roll duplicates, I'll roll again. So the 6 gets re-rolled. So 1, 2, and 5. Actually, is it random or are they? Actually, I don't know if it's random or not, but we're going to go with random just for gameplay purposes. So 1, 2, and 5. These go back to here. Note that the Seleucids could put either garrisons or alliances. They're not restricted to what was removed, I don't believe. Or maybe they have to do the same as was removed, but I don't think so. I think they can put whatever they want. So we're putting garrisons here. That's something I would probably check in the rules, just to double check to make sure that when they defect, it's not the same alignment marker that gets placed. But I believe that they're allowed to put either a garrison or a alliance, depending on what's appropriate. Like you can't put an alliance in a subject city. You can't put garrisons in tribes. So there are restrictions on what you can do, but generally you want garrisons unless it's a Greek place. If you put a garrison in a Greek place, so Greek has the blue title, these are Greek places, then if you had any alliances in that same satrapy, they would be lost. Greeks generally don't like garrisons being put on their cities. Okay, so immediately this changes control of the satrapy, but I'm going to wait to resolve the control, because if these places are also lost, then it's going to be full control and more VPs will be lost. Well, they're already going to lose the full VPs. So if you look, Ptolemy's had full control, which is 3. Now they have no control, so they're going to lose 3 VPs no matter what. It's just a question of, do the Seleucids gain 2, which is simple control, which they have currently, or do they gain the full 3? We'll find out. First, we have to resolve the battle. Seleucid king has the royal army and the 1 military colonist. He has a battle rating of 4. Royal army's elite, so it hits on a 5 or less. This guy's going to hit on a 4 or less. So let me roll. This is the elite royal army. It hits. Oops. So this hits. 4 is still a hit. And then this is the... I like clicking different things, so it actually misses. So they have done 1 hit. The Ptolemy units roll 2 dice. They need 2s. They also do 1 hit. So how does this work? You apply your hits to the enemy force. So the Ptolemies will apply their hit, and Morgaine likes to take the actual die that was the hit. They'll apply it to the military colonist. The Seleucids will apply their hit to one of the mercenaries. Now, let us go to outcome of land battles on the left. If one force is entirely routed, no. So both sides still have units left. Most troops, no. Both sides had 1 troop routed. If equal, most elite. Neither side routed any elites, so it's 0 and 0. In all other cases, battle is indecisive. So, an indecisive battle means the routed units go back to where they were, so they're not dispersed. If they had been defeated, they would have ended up in the dispersed box. Instead, they go back to the satrapy for the Ptolemaic mercenary and back to the king's card for the Seleucid home unit. Because they did not win the battle, they do not get to perform any campaign options, sorry. So unless defeated or indecisive battle, you get 4 campaigns. Well, they had an indecisive battle. So they can't even attempt to siege these or plunder. Note that they could still plunder this, even though it's friendly controlled, because it's at the start of the campaign. At the start of the campaign, Quail was not friendly controlled. So they could have plundered to gain 7 talents. Since they're down to 3, they were kind of looking forward to that. Note that it's 3 talents per unit, so 3, 6, 9. The siege train does count, up to a maximum of what the tax value is, which is the 7. So they could have plundered and gotten 7 talents to their treasury, but the king rolled poorly and did not win the battle. But they still gained control of this satrapy. So we take the satrapy card, so Quell Syria, remove it to the Seleucid. Now, you could do something, if they're upside down, it's simple control. Right side up, it's full control. I'm not going to worry about that. This just lets you know what satrapies they control. Ptolemy's lost control, so they're going to lose the 3 victory points. Seleucids gained simple control, so they're going to gain 2 victory points. The king was involved in a battle, but he didn't win it. If he had won it, he would have gained a renown, which would have added to his victory points as well. But let us adjust victory points. So the territorial VPs of Seleucids go down 3. Their total goes down 3. The Seleucids go up 2. So that is the Seleucid activation. Next is Macedon. Macedon, why they'd like to take control of Peloponnese, they're actually kind of happy with the way things are there. So they're going to have the king campaign in, well, let's see. Do they want the king? We don't have a lot of leaders here. Let's keep the king back for now. So they're going to send Alexandros. He's very loyal. He's got a 7 loyalty. And he's got a 3 battle rating and a 2 siege. Not as good as the king, but there's no one to fight in Central Greece. So he's okay just going to Central Greece and seeing what he can find. They can bring the Achaean unit here. It can operate in these 2 satrapies. I think we have that on one of these cards. Maybe it's the last page of this one. Minor limitations. So you see the Achaeans and Spartans in Peloponnesos and Central Greece. So we're going to take Alexandros, designate him as Strategos 1. Take the Strategos 1 block, designate our origin. We use Thessalia. Oh no, we're actually going to use Peloponnesos, because this allows us to muster. If we designate it here, we couldn't actually muster the Achaean to Thessalia. So we couldn't actually muster it to the origin. But if we designate the controlled satrapy, Peloponnesos, as the origin, we can then muster the Achaeans or this is our target. We move in here, and it's going to cost 3 talents. There's no battle to fight, so we simply go to the 4 campaign options. Note that the satrapy value is 3 for taxation, so we will do a plunder, and that gets us our 3 talents back. And again, it's 3 per unit. He's got 1 unit, so he's going to plunder and get 3 talents and then do 3 sieges. There's only 2 places left to try to get. He's going to try to siege him. So first let's add our 3 talents from the plunder and put a ravaged marker. Now if they gain control next turn, they're only going to get half of the tax value, but that's a next turn problem. And then they have 3 siege values. Note that this is a coastal port with both a Seleucid and a Ptolemaic squadron out here. If they wanted to get frisky with Macedon, they could declare that they're providing siege support to this city to make Macedon require 2 successes in order to take this city. But they have their hands full fighting each other. They don't really care what's going on in Greece, so they're not going to bother really pissing off Macedon. Let's see if we have. So, siege support. Port city is a target of a siege. Any power boarding the series may declare siege support. It may be intercepted. 2 successful siege rolls need to capture it. Okay. Note that it is not an act of war. It doesn't have that little icon next to straits crossing or naval interception. So they could do it just to piss off Macedon, but in a 3-player game, let's call it a little friendly diplomacy where they agree not to annoy Macedon and hope Macedon will keep to themselves, kind of thing. So 3 siege rolls. You're just going to roll all 3 dice at the same time. You're looking for 1s and 2s. So they have 1 success. So they already have the place that's hard to take. So it's just a question of which of these 2 places they want. They'll put the 1 on Athens, and they will place a garrison. This is a Greek place. If this had been an alliance, then they would have lost it. But since it's a garrison, it has no effect placing another garrison. This also gives them simple control, so they gain 1 VP. Note that he does not gain renown for this. He did not fight a battle. He did not take a TH-2 stronghold. He's just out there campaigning and took Athens. So he does not gain renown, but they're going to gain control, simple control, which gives Macedon 1 territorial VP. Yeah, they're both the same. And we need to get the satrapy card for Central Greece. Oops, what happened there? There it is. And this goes in front of Macedon. And that's the Macedon activation. Next is the Ptolemies. So the Ptolemies are in a bit of a pickle because they only have 1 leader currently that can campaign, and that's their king. And once he campaigns, he's stuck. He can't do anything else. So they could bring the 1, 2, 3, 4 units to fight the Seleucid king and his 1 elite and 1 mercenary, or 1 military colonist. Four versus 2 is not a horrible battle. But there's one very important thing to note. Pelusian would have to be the origin satrapy. Because, well, there is a force present. I take that back. There's a force present here. So they could designate this as the origin. All right, origin. Satrapy with existing friendly force or controlled. It's not controlled. So this could be the origin. I was going to say that if this had to be the origin, they would be paying 6 talents per unit. So that's a lot of talents. I mean, even though the Ptolemies generally tend to be rich, that's still a lot of talents. They also note that the Seleucids don't have a lot of money right now. So they may not be able to campaign against the king if they declare a campaign early. But by declaring it early, there's lots of activations later where they may run into trouble and not be able to cancel. So this is going to be a situation where they actually are going to play the long game. They're going to activate this mediocre leader to do a diplomacy action. And they're going to do diplomacy on Rhodes. Okay, so he has a 2 diplomacy. Sorry, not diplomacy. It's called an envoy action. It used to be called diplomacy. We changed it to envoy. So envoy action is target satrapy, which is separated from sea areas, or it's adjacent and so on. But it's Rhodes is separated from sea areas from a friendly satrapy. You pay a talon. They pay 2 extra if they want a +1, but they only need 1 success. So they're gonna go cheap. The Ptolemies are cheap people in this game, I guess. So they're gonna go cheap and just pay the 1 talent. They're gonna roll twice, and they're checking against his diplomacy. There's no alliance or garrison. It's currently unaligned, so they just need a straight 1 or 2 on either die roll. They failed. If they had paid a little more money, they would have succeeded, but they did not. That's the Ptolemaic activation. And now Rome. So with Rome, because they're at war, they're going to try to prosecute this war with the Seleucid consul. So he starts in Adrius, or starts in Italia, and he's going to cross over the Adrius to get into this area. However, the important thing is to look at the agenda and the scope of action. So the scope of action is Illyria and the Adrius Sea Zone. Those are the only areas he can target. Okay? There are no Seleucid-controlled places in either of these areas. So he really doesn't have a target. So we draw the card for him, we flip it, and it's full war. So I'm actually going to put it upside down. And you see that he has 2, as it turns out, he doesn't have a campaign option anyways. So he's going to have 2 legions and a Roman squadron. So 2 legions go on his card. And the Roman squadron goes out in Adrias, because that's within the scope of action. But he doesn't move, because there's no Seleucid places. If the Seleucids did something silly and actually took a place, got an alliance or something like that here, then they would campaign against them. But that's the Roman activation. So then this card is set aside, and it'll be added back to the deck next turn. Now we draw the next event. So it is another recurrent event. This one is Aetolian Ambitions. So if no Roman alliance in Aetolia, remove it. Or sorry, if a non-Roman alliance in Aetolia, remove it. Well, Aetolia has no alliance. So if not, we roll. So there's no alliance, so we roll. 6. Unalign one random alignment marker from Peloponnesus, Corinthos last. So we ignore Corinthos because there's other things that can be unaligned. And I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I roll a 6, I roll again. So 2. 1, 2. Now was it unalign one random alignment marker? So it doesn't matter whether it's alliance or garrison. This comes off. This has several effects. It does not change the Macedon simple control. They still have 4 out of the 6. So VPs are not adjusted. However, they no longer have 2 alliances on the 2 Achaean League Heartland places. So Aratos comes out of the court. There's still 3 leaders in Macedon's court, so they're not getting a replacement leader yet. And the Achaeans go to their banner, because again, there's no alliances, which means this Strategos comes off the map because he no longer has a troop. That's the effect of the top part of the card. Now, ambitious generals. Check loyalty of every friend. Note that this doesn't apply to the king. It's only friends on the map. Using the king's renown as a THM. Every leader that fails rebels. We would have had to check for Alexandros, but note with 7 loyalty, he would have been fine. None of these leaders are on the map. None of the Ptolemaic leaders, and the only Seleucid leader on the map is the king. So we don't actually do any checks of ambitious generals on currently. Now we go to activations at the very bottom. First it's Macedon. So Macedon, they're annoyed about this, and they kind of want to clear out the Spartans. So in this case, we're going to campaign with the king. Oops. So I'm going to rotate him just to indicate he's being activated. Grab the king block. Because this is now simple control, we're designating Central Greece as our origin. Excuse me. We're going to muster the royal army and the siege train. Need the siege train? Nah, we're going to leave the siege train back. You only had this is a tribe, so you don't use the siege train against tribes. You use your battle rating, so it's 4. And then this is just a regular city that should be fairly easy to take. And he can't plunder in here because he's controlling the satrapy at the start of the campaign. So our campaign options are going to be, assuming he beats the Spartans, either subjugations or sieges. There's going to be no plunder option. Does he want to muster this mercenary? I think no. We're going to take a chance. And you'll see what I mean when I say take a chance. Okay. This is the target. He moves in. Costs 3 talents. King gets a discount of 3. So he's actually going to pay 0 talents for this campaign. he designates which places he's targeting, so the unaligned one and Sparta. Note that this is not an active war because the Spartans are an alliance, not a garrison. The Spartans will inherently defend themselves, whether the Ptolemies want them to or not. They always will defend their heartland place. The Achaeans will defend themselves because their heartland place is not controlled by the Ptolemies. This may be a mistake for Macedon. They may have wanted to bring a mercenary with them. In fact, let's do that because I don't want Macedon. Macedon has to be fairly careful early in the game, and I'm hoping that the dice will show you why. But I'll talk about and show you what I mean on why maybe bringing this mercenary is a risk which Macedon may or may not take, but it does mean that they have to pay 2 talents to hire the mercenary and now 3 talents to campaign with them. So their total campaign was 6 minus 3 for the king. That's why they had to pay that extra 3. They also had to pay the 2 to hire that mercenary. We could have brought this mercenary, but again, I don't like leaving Macedon without a troop, and so we're not going to do that. There's different ways to play this out. If you want to save a little money, you could have brought this unit, and then it would not have been that extra 2 to hire this guy. Okay, the king is moved to the target satrapy. We now have combats. 2 separate forces, so you get to pick which order you're going to resolve them. We're going to do the Spartans first, because I'd like to eliminate the Ptolemies from having options in this area, if possible. So, Macedon has their royal army and the mercenary. So the royal army gets +1. So they needed a 5 or less, so that's a hit. And the mercenary needs a 4. A 1, that means they actually inflict 2 hits. Doesn't really matter, there's only 1 unit. The Spartans are Ptolemaic, and they get to roll, and they're going to defend with a 2. No, these guys aren't going to send their king. They don't have any other leaders to defend. They rolled a 5, they missed. So the Spartan unit is dispersed. We'll walk through this first combat just to show you. So back 1 page. Outcome. Well, let's see. Strikes. Each troop strikes after rolling. Not sure you apply hits to enemy troops. So we have 3 hits. We're applying. We only have to apply 1. We apply it to the Spartan unit. Spartans did not succeed in any hits, so they can't apply any to here. Now we go to outcome. If one force is entirely routed, it is defeated. Well, the Spartan force is entirely routed, so it's defeated. 1 renown is gained by the winning strategos and lost by the defeated. 2 each if a defeated king. Well, it's not a defeated king, so all that happens is Philippos gains 1 renown. Okay, that immediately adjusts the total VPs by 1. Routed troops of the defeated side are dispersed. Routed troops, if there were any on the victorious side, return. And then few other things we don't have to worry about withdrawing. And then if they, unless defeated or indecisive battle, now I'm looking on campaign options. So they weren't defeated. It was not an indecisive battle. They get 4 campaign options. Again, they can't plunder because it was fronting controlled at the start of the campaign. So he's going to do... Oh, no, we don't get to the campaign options yet. We have another battle to fight, sorry. We have the Achaeans. So this was the first battle. Now we do the second battle. Same thing. The elite unit, the Royal Army, hits on a 5 or less. And then the mercenary on a 4 or less. So they inflict 2 hits. And they only need 1. Ptolemies will roll for the Achaean. 5, they miss again. So the same effect happens. The renown goes up to 2. He gets another total VP. The Achaean unit goes to the dispersed box. And now we resolve the campaign options. So remember I was talking, I wanted to show you what would have happened if we didn't send this extra unit, the Aetolian mercenary. So let's pretend that this is the first combat versus the Spartans. We'll even let him roll a 1. So he inflicted 2 hits on the Spartans in this hypothetical scenario. Now the Ptolemies, or the Ptolemies roll. Let's say they get super lucky and they roll a 1. They inflict 2 hits on Macedon. Elite units require 2 hits to rout. So because they rolled the 1 and inflicted 2 hits, they would rout the elite unit. They're also routed because Macedon did 2 hits on them. But when you look at the outcome, if only, if one force only is entirely routed, no, both sides would be routed in this hypothetical. One, who had the most troops routed? No, only 1 troop of each side is routed. If equal, side which had the most elite troops rout is defeated. Macedon had an elite unit, Spartans were not. So if Spartans had rolled the 1, or the Achaeans, right, in either battle, if a 1 had been rolled by the other side, Macedon would lose. Their royal army would be dispersed. This king would get negative renown, -2 in fact, because he'd be a defeated king. And it would have been really bad. So because Macedon wants to make sure they don't start out bad, I mean, they're already next to Rome. They have a lot of things going against them. A lot of times it's better when you're fighting in Peloponnesos against a single regular unit to bring that extra mercenary just in case, because now, okay, Sparta had 2 forces. They did 2 hits. They can't rout the entire force. They would put their hits on the on the elite unit and rout it. But look at the first outcome. If 1 force only is entirely routed, Macedon would not have been entirely routed because they still would have had this other unit. In fact, with only 1 unit rolling against them, they could never lose both units because the elite unit needs 2 hits, this guy only needs 1. So by bringing that extra unit, you insulate yourself against the dreaded 1. And because they had to fight 2 battles and each battle could have rolled a 1, that's why they definitely went with bringing the extra unit in this case. If it was just the Spartans, maybe you take the chance. Maybe you take the chance, you roll on with the king, and you just hope for the best. And if they roll a 1, okay, they roll a 1, your royal army gets dispersed, you'll come back later with another unit. But here, we made sure that couldn't happen. Sent the extra unit, paid the extra money, cost us 5 extra talents, but it was worth it in case a 1 had been rolled. Now we're at campaign options. They're going to do 2 subjugations to try to capture this, and 2 sieges to try to capture this. I'll roll the subjugations first. Note that Sparta has a THM -1 flag, So his battle rating of 4 goes down to a 3 for effective result. So we need to roll two subjugations needing a 3 or less on either die. We got one, we put it on Sparta. Now we have 2 sieges. Again, Perseus has a siege rating of 3. That's a low siege tower on the campaign. There's no THM here, so he just needs a 3 on either. Oops, let me re-roll that. On either of these dice. 5 and 4, so he failed. So he did capture this. This goes back on the Ptolemy area. It's a tribe represented by the circle, so you have to place an alliance. Next turn, they will be able to muster the Spartans. They can't muster them this turn because it's dispersed. They did not gain full control because they missed on the sieges. So there's no change of VPs. That's the end of the Macedon activation. Now we do the Ptolemy activation. Again, this is only the second recurrent event card, so they're still going to play it relatively safe. They're going to use this leader again. This time, they're going to again do envoy action to Rhodes, but they'll pay the extra this time. So 1, 2, 3 talents. So 2 dice, because it's an envoy action, and they need a 3 or less. So diplomacy of 2 plus 1 for the extra 2 talents. 3 or less on either die. And of course, if they had done, let's say, diplomacy against this Seleucid place here with the alliance, the first success could be applied to remove the alliance. Then the second success would have been applied to put a Seleucid alliance there instead. Because there's no alliance to remove on Rhodes, all they get to do is place a Seleucid alliance here. This gains them Rhodos. Rhodos is 1 VP and 4 talents for later. That's not bad. But they immediately go up 1 VP territorial. And total, obviously. They also gain control of the Rhodian fleet. I don't know where I'm going. This is an elite fleet, the only elite fleet in the game. It can operate either in the Aegean Pelagos or Pamphylian Pelagos. We're going to put it here. Actually, we'll put it next to the other. So all 3 fleets are together here. This leader is now fully spent. He can't be used for the rest of this turn. Now we have the Seleucid activation. The Seleucids would love to keep campaigning, but they are poor. Okay, right? They're down to 3 talents. However, they do control the satrapy now. So what they're going to do is have... They're going to have Zeusis. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And his 4 admin rating do a raise taxes action. So raise additional taxes. Designate 1 or 2 adjacent controlled satrapies without a ravaged or tax increase marker. So they could go both of these satrapies. It's a little risky. And this is only 5 talents. This is 7. But again, we're not playing the best possible option, so we're going to take that chance. We're going to designate these two satrapies, two adjacent satrapies. There's no cost, and then we check the leader's admin for each satrapy. If there's a troop present, it's +1, and we're looking for successes, basically. So remember, his admin is 4. We're going to roll this satrapy first. There is a troop. It's in the kings, but it's still a troop in this satrapy. Note that the enemy forces do not prevent raise additional taxes, okay? It just can't be a ravaged or taxes increased marker. It has to be controlled. So 5 or less is what we're looking for. 1, great success. So we take a taxes increased marker. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I know what the result is. Okay, let's. So, if there's a success, so you got the green thumbs up, add the tax value of the satrapy and place the taxes increased marker in that satrapy. If the success margin was 0, so if I had rolled a 5, flip it to its ravaged side instead of the taxes increased. Note that taxes increased marker simply means that during the rest of the action phase, you can't raise taxes in that satrapy again. There's no penalty for having a taxes increased marker in the satrapy. If it's ravaged, you would get half revenue during the revenue phase. Anyway, so going back, it's a 7. And it's also, let me add the tax value of the satrapy. So actually, he's only going to add 4 because he only has simple control of the satrapy. He can't get the full 7 because he couldn't tax it at the full 7. He can only tax it at the rate of 4. But still, 4 is better than nothing. So 1, 2, 3, 4 goes up to 7. Now he does the same thing here, but there's no troop present. So now his roll is just against his natural 4 admin rating. Oh, okay. And this is why I was saying it is somewhat risky of an action. We're going to see how risky this is. So, did he get the green thumbs up? No. Success margin 0? No. Did he fail with success margin of -1? No. Remember, his rating is 4. He rolled a 6. That's a failure with a success margin of -2. So a failure with a success margin of -2 or worse, place a ravaged marker and revolt in one random aligned place in that satrapy. Then we roll again, and on a 6, he dies. So the people really did not like him. So we need a ravaged and a revolt. So the ravaged goes in. So it's you ignore the Ptolemaic. It's only friendly aligned places. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. 3. 1, 2, 3. So this place goes into revolt. Actually, I guess these we can stick with the snap. And now we roll another die. And if it's a 6, Zeus dies. 1. Whew. Okay, so we dodged a bullet. So a lot of times when you raise taxes, you really like to have a troop present, but sometimes you just have to take your chances. And note that no money got added here. So and because it's ravaged, he can't try raising taxes here again. We can try in Babylonia with its 7, but there's no troop present. So again, there's going to be a risk that the same die roll of 6 could come up and result in bad things. And then finally, it's Rome. Rome draws a new activation card for the Seleucid leader. So we're looking on the bottom. There's going to be 2 legions, 2 squadrons, and a campaign icon. Again, they can only campaign to these two areas. There's no Seleucid targets, basically, so he just sits in Italia. But we do take the troops off of the card. Why is it not? Oh, the troops are in his thing. This gets discarded. This is the new card. And he's got 2 legions and 2 squadrons, so we have to add the extra squadron out here. And that is the Roman activation. I'm going to put the cards up here so we know how many of the recurrent events have been drawn. Because once we get 4, then when Winter Quarters comes up, the turn will end. But we only have 2 cards right now. And I'm going to stop here, and then I'll make another video continuing with the rest of the continuing the action phase, and try to play through the entire first turn.